You're good.
Okay, I hereby call the regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order at 7 o'clock on May 10th. Let's all stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all.
So in attendance tonight, we have Ryan, Brianna, Mary, myself, and Glenn might be joining us on the phone, and we have Dan is absent tonight. So we can start, do we have any public comment? Okay. Do you wanna go ahead?
Sure. We have had two communication and correspondence from the same person. Andy Correa, 45 West Wisconsin Road. That was it. And then I would like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from April 12th, 2023.
1 second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Tara, report of the first selectman.
Good evening, everyone. Happy, nice weather season, finally. Yeah, just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. Marcia has prepared a slide regarding this topic that was brought to my attention on Monday, I want to say. So with our former director of Parks and Rec departure and then onboarding Laura as our new director, there's been a little bit of a time lag in kind of getting some estimates, right? So some of these issues have been out for a long time. The field in particular has been there for decades, as we went over ad nauseum through the capital committee. But in going after the track and field this summer, the new director's thought process was to just do the tennis courts simultaneously, which are in major disrepair as well. And we had allocated previously, I think it was $15,000 to do some crack repairs, and then we had since nixed that. But the long and the short of it is those tennis courts need attention ASAP. And an estimate came back. It ended up being, I think, $123,000 over what the initial ballpark range was. So the long and short of it is Laura is now talking back with the schools, the athletics director and the principal, to see what their priorities are essentially and how they want to go about this. Because if we can get after it all, not all, but do the track and the field and the tennis courts at the same time, it would be ideal going into the next school year. She just wants to make sure that the field drainage could potentially be postponed for now, because the new estimate on the drainage is over $1 million. So that's out there. We sat with Marcia today. Marcia, do you want to touch more on it from the things we discussed as far as the bonds?
So both of these, the tennis courts and the field drainage, are 2023 bonded, and we can switch between projects within the same bond year. So fortunately, they're both in the same bond year. The only other money that's Parks and Rec or unencumbered at this time is their addition to their storage shed for $125,000, and that is also needed. If we talk about the tennis courts, the budget was $466. It was based on a written quote that was June 4th of 21. The costs are now $554 to $590. The $590 from two different companies. The $590 includes a protective fence. The same company that gave us the $466 is now doing the $554 for the same work. So, and I'll send you this slide. So that's a 10% escalation in pricing per year. So Laura this is only a preliminary discussion to call your attention to it. She's talking with the school athletic director and principal and Ken to coordinate to make sure that they're all agreeing on what the priorities are. They would like to do the tennis courts very quickly when school ends. So hopefully, there's a plan that gets brought together and it comes back to you next month, possibly with a transfer. The field drainage, that Parks and Rec had hired an engineer in the 22 budget, that to get engineered plans, that they had some personnel, they had COVID excuses, that engineered plans we didn't have. So Mary had talked to a civil engineer to get an informal estimate of 220. This year she added another 30,000, thinking that, okay, escalation of prices, that didn't pass. So 220 is what it is in the budget now. They just got the engineer's estimate for what needs to be done and the cost. She hasn't had a chance to go through it or really understand it as much as she would want to, but it's closer to $1 million. So the question, do you take 120 and move it to the tennis courts and leave the 100 there? We've got to spend the 100 in 3 years, and we'd be forced to put another 900 in there. It seems to make more sense to and again, if everyone agrees on the education side, to get rid of the field drainage, move 100 and whatever's needed to the tennis courts. She's looking, the one company, both companies' bids are based on a collaborative pricing so we wouldn't have to go out for a separate bid. If they were to do both the field, the track, and the tennis courts, could we get a quantity discount? So there's still movement that's going here. But it seems that the best idea might be to make sure we can get the tennis courts done, scrap the field drainage, and the additional monies that would be left over after that. The radios are also a 2023 bonded project, and when we talked about the radios last month, we didn't have enough to cover as much of the contingency as we wanted. So if we were to move this either up into the radios or just leave it in a 2023 unallocated, so it's not approved to be spent yet for the radios, that it would have to come back to the boards for that. So that's the thoughts right now.
I have a few questions.
And she'll be here next month. She had a conflict tonight.
The track and field, we're looking, if it passes, obviously, that would be this summer, right? This would be a
Yes.
project this summer. So that's where we're looking for the tennis courts. And then at what point, $1 million is a lot of money, right? I mean, we know we have a field shortage problem with baseballs. Fields, what point do we just say, and who makes this call where $1 million is way too much, let's find another piece of property and put a baseball field in, right? I mean, or something like that, right? I mean, I know there's a problem because.
And a skate park, and a pickleball court, and.
Right, but I'm just saying $1 million is not doable. We know that there's a problem. Last time we spoke with Mary, she said that there was a lot of the fields where the games were just postponed because they couldn't play on wet fields, and there's just such a shortage. So to fix that problem, is it 200,000 somewhere else or something? Who makes that call? I'm just curious.
Well, ultimately the voters, because if we can't afford it, it's not gonna be in the budget.
Right.
Or if they want it, then, I mean, look, how many decades has the field been soggy? It was a
Yeah.
very rainy baseball season this year. I would like to know how many games were either moved or postponed or whatever because of the rain this season. Might be.
There are also money in the new school project to build a 90-foot field at Wiskinier once the portables came down. I thought that's already in a budget somewhere to take care of that. I mean, I know that's inconvenient for a high school ball team, but it means that there's potentially.
Softball team played a Cadigan last week when they had.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, for their senior night, they had to play a Cadigan.
Okay.
They did it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
something to do for now, right?
But I mean, I'm just thinking if we already have a plan to have a 90-foot field, then maybe that helps support the potential moving money to tennis courts. What is the process for doing that? I mean, that's not doing the baseball field is not what the voters, but I guess they voted on the 220,000, but I guess well, obviously it's not something we need to decide tonight, but what's the process for changing that money?
The formal process for, according to the bond authorization, is the treasurer and the first selectman can make that decision. And then last year, you increased that threshold, that if it was over 10% or 10,000, whichever is higher, that it would go through the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance as well.
Okay. So it's
So
the
she'll
checks
come
and
back to us
balances.
later.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of like the, it's one of those situations like the high school locker room almost, like where we did vote on something and then it's just a different level of something. So similar to that, you know, we just need to, I think if there's a way, and we'll have more information for June. So I think
Well,
that's,
The,
you know,
the urgency here is that the track and field is supposed to start the weekend after, or the week after graduation. So if we're going to get after the tennis courts, the company would need to know, we
Okay.
have given them a promise letter for if the budget passes, that they can, it's a go. But I think we're gonna really have to try to work through this to figure out what we're telling the company.
well, we
The
could
promise-
definitely.
The promise for the tracks is a go if it passes.
Correct.
If it passes, right, but for the tennis courts, we can absolutely, if we needed to have a special meeting to just, like you were saying, to just move that from the field to the tennis court, right? Is that what you're saying? We could do that if they needed an answer right
It would
now.
have to be a joint meeting, right, because it'd have to go through the.
Right.
selectmen.
Right,
And if the if the referendum passes in the first round, we have to set the mill rate meeting anyways.
And so we
we
could
do have
add-
to meet
Yeah.
in the
so we could
coming
add that
week.
on, again, I know.
Your
I know.
agenda?
Yeah, but Laura is working hard to work her way through this, and she wants to make sure that she's ready when, with all the answers to any questions you're gonna ask her. So, and all of this just came up in the last week or so.
Great.
Anything else on that for now? No, okay.
All I would say is let's all just as a group talk once, like, if obviously we have the budget passed, if we need to add something on to the mill rate meeting, because it'll be a special meeting, we could all do that. So I guess it just,
We'd have to coordinate to make sure that you guys have the board of selectmen meeting first.
So
Get all the timing worked out.
so we
So
could just do that.
just to note as well, Cynthia Caban is our new executive assistant. So she'll be flying solo starting on Monday.
Okay.
And all systems are a go there, so anything you need, I'll forward you her email if you don't already have
I
it.
think she was CC'd on something though, so I
Okay.
think I have it from Ginny, when Ginny sent me something. So perfect.
Yeah, that actually might work out because we need a special meeting, so if we could arrange for that, we'll see
Yeah,
how it goes,
figure.
but.
Okay.
I had two other little things. The salary survey, the last I heard, the information as of Friday was that there was a lot of information in the RFP. But there's been no quotes. The deadline for that, I think, is the 19th of May, so we'll see what happens up to that point. But, and then, I don't know if you all have been following the cemeteries issue. I just wanted to kind of see if you had any questions about it at this juncture. You'll see it later on in the agenda with the interdepartment transfers, but it's one of these things that just, the problem's not gonna go away, so we're continuing to try to figure out, what does that mean for the town, and so, there's a lot of legal work that does need to be done, and it's outside of the retainer, so there may be a PO that we're gonna have to get after, but I do need to talk to the board about that. And just get out there and vote on the 16th, so. Thank you.
Thank you. So, if Belgium wants to join for the Board of Ed Finance report?
You're collecting them. I sent you all the latest Outlook. I brought copies in case anybody needed one. Did you need one, Ken?
No, but I've got mine.
I've already presented it to you,
Yes.
so I think you're good. So, every month I give you an update on where we are on our current year spend. Since we last met, we've actually gone through two forecast things, because if you remember when we last met, I think Joy spoke to you all, we actually hadn't done our April forecast, and now we've actually done that April and the May forecast. So we're actually, we just did that last week. So I highlighted on the sheet that I just handed out the latest forecast. We're at 596,000, so still hovering in that 575 to 600 range. The major thing that changed in the two forecasts, first we got better, more excess cost reimbursement, and then they came back and said, oh no, it's it's actually a little less. So it got better, and then it got a little worse by $220,000. Most of the other stuff, there's really no surprises in here. There's not much change. We have a continuing, savings on the leaves and vacancies and offset by substitutes, right? So, and other than that, I think most of the other numbers are identical over the forecasts. So,
Does this have the new substitute rate in here?
yes, we actually, it's not very much this year. It's only like $10,000 for the year, but yes, we did bake that in. So, it's interesting, the substitute rate point, it's not apparent whether that actually costs us or saves us, interestingly enough. Because we were having difficulty attracting subs through the agency, we actually had to go hire some of the long-term subs ourselves, and the rate for us to hire directly is much higher. So if we can, the goal was to get the long-term sub rate up to a point where we can hire through the agency, and that will actually save us money, interestingly enough. But we don't know, we can't gauge yet how much that will save us. So when I asked Ken, how much is it going to cost or save? It's a little, we got to see what some experience gets us through this spring, and then more importantly in the fall. And those are for the situation where somebody takes a long leave, right? So it may actually help us, it may hurt us a little bit. It's not moving a lot of money around. So that's kind of the update. No real surprises. I will tell you that within this, we still have $145,000 of uncommitted at this point textbook and books budget, right? And we've told Ken, be cautious, just don't spend that yet until we make sure that nothing else is moving. That's the sort of thing that they have lists of things they would want to go buy at the end of the year, but you can gauge it as you get into the last months of the year.
But if those aren't kicking the can down the road items that they're
No,
still
no.
gonna need to get next year?
No. So, well, perhaps a little bit, but but we deal with that every year, right, to be frank. So it's, and $145,000 is not the bulk of that budget, right? Most textbooks cost you, most of $1 million when you roll out a new textbook, so. But they have enough flex in there that if we have small things, Ken says we can manage it, right? And not expecting therefore this to move a lot, so that's the update on the spending.
And do we expect it to stay fairly level down through June?
I asked Ken when we met, do you expect the 596 to hold? He says pretty close to it. He says we'll have up and down slightly, but we're seeing it all kind of comes down to the vacancies and substitutes. We're not expecting at this point to have much in the way of some of the big drivers, like, we're not going to have a big special ed situation that's, with 4 weeks left in the school year, right? That generally doesn't happen, and things stabilize out. There's a little upward pressure on the legal costs, right, that we're monitoring carefully. So, now,
I think you wanted to speak to the communications that we've been getting.
oh, yes, I should.
So,
Before I jump to that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you we talked a little bit about capital on the
Yeah.
town side, because Parks and Rec does do our outside the buildings. At our last facilities meeting, just as an information point, we discovered that they need to put in some moisture seal under the new Wiskaneer cafeteria flooring that has been approved. They don't know how much that's going to cost, but they're going to come back in our next facilities meeting and tell us if that gives us an exposure. And apparently it's damp, and that's one of the reasons the tiles lift at Wiskaneer. So they did some testing, and the independent testing agency says you really ought to go reseal that. And what that entails is grinding off the existing ceiling and then placing a new sealant on it before you put down new tiles. And that's a project for this summer. So that's one issue I'm focusing on. The other thing that's just kind of boggling my mind, to tell you the truth, is every time they take a wall down in the locker room project, they discover something new that wasn't in the detailed plans. The plans were 1970-ish vintage, so when we start taking walls down, you discover things. We did have contingencies, right? And so they've used, I think, 2/3 of the contingency with Discovery. So they're monitoring that one carefully. I am hoping we do not have to come back and talk to you guys about locker room. But I just wanted to let you know we're really paying attention to that as we're watching that project. That one's in the hands of the municipal building committee, just as an aside.
Yeah.
So.
Do we, I mean, you've been through a couple of this, especially with building and maintaining buildings. Is the majority of contingency used during the discovery process, or does it eventually go throughout time and just see what our
Every
risk is?
project is different.
Okay.
Right? Every project I've found is different. We've had lots of projects we haven't used our contingency. In fact, we've underrun the cost on the project. We've had also projects there, you discovered things at the end. It was
At the end.
finishing issues. And then this one happens to be as they're taking walls down. So, so I've seen it every which way.
Do we
But
have
I would say we have more where we don't even use our contingency than situations where we do. So.
I think we talked about it last month, I just don't remember specifically. Do we have some leftover capital funds from projects that didn't use their contingency that will help?
Well, we've
offset?
tried to take contingency out of the projects, because we don't want every project to have a
Yeah.
contingency. That had $68,000 in it as a contingency, and I provide monthly reporting to the MBC on their projects, other than what Arcadis does for Canterwood Lake. Hearing that there's these changes and the contingencies being used, I went back and read the minutes, and so the MBC hasn't approved, there's one I couldn't find for electrical panels, the change order number 1, but so far the MBC in their minutes has only approved 10,000 or so, maybe not a lot of contingency. But I did, with this month's report that I sent out on Tuesday, I did ask Paul to let us know if there's others that are missing, what the amount of the purchase order number 1 is. Because on the books, it looks like they still have money, but if
That's
there's...
probably true, because we were getting a kind of a send-ahead message more than we were, here's the approvals message, so
Yeah,
that would make sense to me.
And they're pretty tight on making sure all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed before they approve anything. So it's possible that they have something big out there and it's just not in their minutes. But as far as I can tell, from the minutes, from what we have and the correspondence that we have, we still have space.
Thank you.
Okay, so you all received one of your correspondences from Mr. Correa making statements about the truck, right, and the acquisition of the truck. As Joy tells me at last month's meeting, you all asked to have a response to that. So she launched that over to Mr. Post and Mr. Caldwell. They've done a bunch of research. They've prepared this. I'm going to read this so that the public can hear it, but I wanted to make sure you got it in writing as we go through this. Is that the speaker? Yeah, you should have one. You should have one, Tara.
Thank you.
So this has to do with the maintenance vehicle. I'll start with the budget was approved in the May 2021 budget, right, as a capital item, specific capital item for procuring a replacement truck. That was submitted by us in early December, right, because of the lead times on budget. So the approval was May 2021. The cost estimate was probably late 2020, right? And what underlying this, we all know that inflation on cars and availability of cars in that intervening period has been ridiculous, to tell you the truth. So, after it was approved in the summer of 2021, Mr. Caldwell had a regular checking in with dealerships and under our state contract, and for over a year, with no avail. He talked to the state contract office in the fall of 2022 and December of 2022. He spoke to Monaco Ford in two different times in 2022. He spoke to Colonial Ford, and he's spoken to Ingersoll Auto. So there were, throughout all of this, there was no availability, right? There was one instance where Ingersoll thought they had a truck in the fall of 2022, and by the time we got over to the site to take a look at it, someone had come in and scooped it up.
Can you
And
just clarify what kind of a truck was this?
This is it's like a utility maintenance type truck.
Okay.
And just to do it, this will give you a picture in your mind's eye. I think I showed you that at
Yep.
your Board of Selectmen meeting. For all of those of you, the one, this is the old truck and this is the new truck that we have in hand right now.
So the new truck just didn't come with the back.
That was the issue, right? The pricing that we had exceeded $50,000. So the acquisition of the truck did not have the gate. assembly.
Visually, that helps.
Yes.
Okay, understood.
So, but this is the old one, just so we're clear. Confused. Yeah, I got Harry Shaker confused when we did it at the Board of Selectmen. He finally, in January of 2023, was able to, with Ingersoll, identify a truck that cost $49,000, which was a lot higher than we had budgeted a full 2 years earlier, right? And that's partly the escalating costs of trucks. And it was without the whole back assembly, you know, the bed and the lift gate and the tool things that are on the sides of it. But we could get a truck, and I'll tell you, there was cheering in the hallways when they found out that there was actually a truck available. So soon after that, Mr. Post, Mrs. Marion, and Julian Cappadoce talked about it and concluded that the demand's high, we should do a bid waiver, so we didn't have to go do a bidding process, and proceed with a purchase requisition for the vehicle. So that was in late January into early February of this year. And I think, Marcia, you were actively part of that conversation, correct?
We were actively part of that conversation, and as part of that conversation, we talked about the town's experience, that we had both a police vehicle and a fire marshal vehicle that we had issues with last year in September or so, that we had orders, and don't quote me on the years, but it was like a 21 truck or vehicle, and they canceled all the orders for the 21, and we had to do a 22, and we had to sign it within like 5 days. We asked you for more money, and then just a week or two ago, they said they're canceling the 22 orders. For many of the customers, the fire marshal he got notice that his was still going to go through at the price discussed, which was higher than the 21, of course. I haven't heard from the police on if theirs went through or not. I know that we had problems with we didn't do it, but it's the fire department also had issues getting vehicles. It's just been a nightmare that it's a year or two wait on these vehicles. And on some of them that we had, a similar thing happened. There was one on the lot that if we wanted it, we would have to act appropriately, quickly to get it.
So at that moment in time, we had a $50,000 approved capital item and a $49,000 truck, albeit it didn't have the back assembly. And every person involved in the administration and in the two controllerships said, you ought to go buy that truck, right? And then we'll go deal with having to go get additional appropriations to finish it, right? So they issued the purchase order on February 22nd. They invoiced us on March 7th, and we paid them on March 21st and took possession of the vehicle on March 24th. Now, if you think about the timing of things, and I'll pause here, and it's not in your write-up, on March 1st, we had a facilities committee meeting. They came to us and said, we've got a cost estimate for getting the trailer, we need approval. We had a bunch of questions. We sent them back. A week later, on March 9th, we had a special meeting of the facilities committee, and we approved it at the facilities committee, and we had to do it then because it had to go to the Board of Education that next week, so that we could get it approved in time to go to the Board of Selectmen at their meeting at the beginning of April, and to you all on April 12th. So that was the whole timing of events on that. And so we had no other financial arrangements with Ingersoll other than they gave us a cost estimate. Once it was approved for the additional $15,313 to buy the utility body, we started proceeding down the path. So the purchase order for that was issued on, and it was $16,285, which had the remaining little bit of the $50,000 plus the $15,313 that was approved. And that is where we are right now. They delivered it to the supplier, and I asked Ken today, when do you expect to have that in? And it should be probably by the end of this month, have it in and installed. So I just, it was an awkward situation. I would have, one might argue that you shouldn't have done anything until you had the full amount. But it was a logical thing to do at the time that we, in order we would lose out on getting a truck at all. So, and we had actually worked hard to make sure every single party in the administration on both the town and the schools, because of course the town is managing the capital, was involved in that. So when I kind of took a look at it, I said this made sense to me. And we didn't commit any money until we actually had the additional authorizations, because we wouldn't do that. So.
And it certainly, like Marcia said, isn't the first time this has happened, and it most certainly won't be the last. It's
I
just
think you're right.
the way of the world right now, and the process was done according to how we're supposed to do things. Now, has this outline been given to the resident, or?
I have written it in general terms, but I will send it to her.
If I could add that, I have a hard time, I was an auditor for 35 years, I have a hard time taking that hat off. So there were some allegations that things were backdated in Munis, and I have access to everything in Munis. I went into the audit trail and all these dates, because I have a draft of Ken's outline, that all these dates I verified that those were the dates. You can't backdate the audit trail. That's what it's for. You cannot change that. So none of the dates were manipulated in Munis. The purchase order was on February 17th. That is a definite date, not only in Munis, but that was my last day before I went out for surgery. And we talked about it, and we said, who's going to do that purchase order? And I said, that's your job. And so I know precisely that was the date. And there was talk originally about it would be cheaper that if we did both, but we couldn't do that because we didn't have the budget to commit it in advance. And so I think it cost us maybe $600 more or something to divide it into to the two pieces. But just as far as the allegations that these were backdated, that is not the case.
Thank you to the board and to Ken and Dan for putting that together. I think that helps paint a clearer picture. We've been getting emails and seeing stuff. I think it's good to have this timeline. It makes it.
Yeah, I told them it was good. It was it was clear. So.
And this old, just so I know, this old truck, is this broken down at this point, or?
It's starting to fail.
Gotcha.
Right? It's used to carry
I see
around.
I see the rust.
Yeah, you can see that it's rusting out is what's happening. So I've actually asked, what are you going to use it for? And he said, we'll probably keep it around through the move to the new school, because we're going to be lugging things all over the place, and then retire it. So that's because it needed replacement. So. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's what, and that's all I have for you tonight. Is there anything else on the agenda I should stick around for, or?
No.
Okay.
police want some money.
Cool.
The police want some money.
Of course. Everybody in this town needs money for the right things, so I'm a big supporter of doing the right things at the right times in the right way. So you guys have been great. I want to thank you for everything you guys do. And I hope you can come to our comedy show on Saturday night. That's actually, in retrospect, I'm very happy we're not doing it on Friday night because half of the town is going to be tied up with the program.
Or we'll just be sitting at home waiting for everybody to.
All right, thank you all.
I have all that, they're all coming.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
All right, so you received the reports, they're in your packages, and you received them in advance. With respect to the current year, the revenue is still on target. It hasn't changed too much other than I did a little bit more detail on land use fees, trying to take the prior May and June and what we collected instead of just saying we would collect the budget. So that did up at maybe $100,000. But on this slide, it's just, we've talked about, well, where would we end up on fund balance? And at one meeting, I was trying to do it in my head. And so this first column here is we started with 11.6 million of fund balance. We had a balanced budget, so we would have ended with 11.6 million of fund balance. We've made some minor changes here. We keep projecting now over $3 million more revenue than what we had anticipated. A lot of that is interest, a lot of that is the FEMA reopening grant. And then we're using, if the budget passes, we would be using 2.8 million of that money for capital. So we would still have 800,000 more revenue than what we had net of what we had anticipated that would go into fund balance. The expenditures, the town side is balanced back and forth, but the Board of Ed needs $596,000 $596,000 more. Oh, I have a hard time even saying that.
Right.
And we have $397,000 worth of contingency, so it's about 193,000 more than 197,000 more that they need. Sorry, I can see it here with my glasses. $199,000 more that they need, and that would come out of fund balance. So we would, if everything is on target like this, we would end up with 604,000 more in our fund balance. And we always look at what that would be. At the beginning of the year, we were 15.59% of our 2022 budget. And at the end of the year, we would be 15.76 of our 2023 budget. That is the total fund balance and not the amount that's allocated out for future appropriations. As far as the expenditure goes, the intra-department expenditures were approved by the Board of Selectmen. We have some inter, and I have copied the slide from last month and did the same thing. I called them both inter. The intra, but the inter transfers need to be approved, reviewed, and potentially approved by you. Just going through where we need the money, the selectmen, we have Ginny is back and she is training Cynthia. And so there's some double up time there. So that's $4,000. The tax collector is including a notice to in her tax bills that their summer hours. And so she needed a little more money there. Travel and conferences were cut during the budget, but they had an unexpected turnover in the tax office, so that there had to be some training there. Legal, we've got various cases going on we need about $5,000 more there. And these are based on purchase orders. Every time a case is opened, They put in an estimated amount, they think most of them are like $2,500. So it's possible we don't need that at the end if the timing isn't right, that it gets used by June 30th, or if a case closes. But right now, between actual payments and encumbrances, we're short about 3,000, so we're asking for 5,000 there. Human Resources is looking for more money for the actuary costs. Employee benefits, that when HR divided up the health insurance, they divided it up into 26, as they always do, but there's 27 pay periods, and it's not fair to take out 27, to take out an extra pay period. So what we'll do is we will not withhold health insurance on the 27th pay period. That I see you smiling already. I thought that was good. That so we won't withhold that. It's a 27th pay. And then the other thing that is weird, but Munis does it, is when we do accrued payroll, that we have Munis calculate it, because there's 100 different categories of pay that goes to different lines in the budget. And so what they do, and unless you're an accountant, you won't really find this weird, but normally we wouldn't prorate withholding. We would take it in the withholding for the accrued payroll would go against next year as a liability. But Munis doesn't do it that way. And so assuming that nothing has changed in Munis, that it's a half a pay, they'll take half a pay and put it back this way, this year. But Munis changes things all the time. If they correct that, and then I need more money there. But that's the way they've done it in the last 4 years. Building maintenance, we have this building over here. The rent has been increased $1,050 a month. There was a realtor fee to get a new tenant in there, which I think is in there now, or this weekend?
The 12th.
The 12th. So there's $2,800 for that fee. There was about $11,000 worth of repairs and appliances that were put in. Some of that came out of what Ralph had in the budget. Some of that came out with an interfund transfer. And intra-fund transfer, and we need $5,000 in an inter-fund transfer. The historic district, they just have had a lot of activity. They're setting up a new district. They need some more money for their clerk to the boards. Debt service, this is financing costs, legal bonding costs, that if we're not going to do a bonding this year, usually we roll those bond costs into the bonding, but we'll pay them currently, so we need to increase that budget because there's time spent doing the bond resolution and things like that. And then this $44,000, I wanted to get it out of where it could be spent. That if the budget passes, we want to take $44,000 of the salt and sand savings and move it for a specific truck. So that's where all the money is going to, and then there's a number of small places where the money is coming out of.
I had a few questions. I don't know, did anybody else have?
Sure.
Okay. So the first one, the legal fees, the $5,000, I mean, we have a retainer though, so why are we going?
So the retainer covers things like, could you look at this contract? Is this normal? Is this appropriate? General questions. I have one on ARPA. It'll cover that, but it specifically states that it doesn't cover litigation. And Tom Beecher's didn't cover litigation either. That the retainer agreements are very similar. So these are litigation cases that mostly having to do with land use litigation cases. That we have a separate budget for taxes, so that's not included here. So I'm trying to think. I think almost all of them are land use cases that are out there.
And do we see that this is to the end of the fiscal year, we think, or?
This is what if another case comes up, then it's not good. But every month we go through and we ask everyone, the people that are using this account, could you look at your cases? If you've got a purchase order and the case is closed, could you close it? So this is our best guess through the end of the year.
Do we think then that our budget line item for this budget that we're putting to the referendum is accurate?
Well, you bring up a good question as far as the retainer is concerned. For everything outside of the retainer, you really never know. It's a guesstimate, but I
We have historical
think
data
we're
that we
getting
have
like
to-
a lot of legal work for a $60,000 price tag, and I think the town has been paying $60,000 for many years, and there's been no invoicing in previous years, so we don't know what's been charged for that amount, but I can tell you based on the invoicing in the 18 months that I've been here with this legal team, there's a lot of work, and it seems like we're getting off really, really cheap. So we may want to consider where other towns are and paying their their town attorneys, because I don't know if that's, I don't know, we need to look at, it's a good question.
So actually, Jules has done some research on the legal fees, just where we stand and how it compares. And again, all of these are different because there's different cases and things like that each year. I don't know what happened in 16, 17, and 18, but there were a lot of legal things going on.
Well, I mean, some of
And
the
no
the
invoices.
rebounds.
This is not the retainer, so this is only the things that are outside of the retainer. This is that same line item
Well,
that,
wouldn't there be invoices for those?
oh, there's invoices for all of them,
Okay.
yep. And we have all the details right here.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, 2018 was the macro burst, right? And there was a reval shortly thereafter, maybe that would have hit 2019. But I know that there was a lot of,
In 2020, 21 was COVID, so, you
yeah.
know,
So it's
it's.
kind of,
Yeah.
no one was causing any trouble.
Exactly.
So,
You know,
We're all
Yeah,
all
I'll be
inside.
curious to see what 2017, if 2017 and 2018 are more indicative of a normal year versus,
Yeah.
2019, 2021 that were.
That's right, it's hard to look at everything is hard to look
Yeah.
at when you're coming out of that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
well, it's something to watch,
Yep,
for sure.
and then I had a question for the actuary costs. So 4,000 additional, I didn't bring my cheaters, so I can't read the budget to see what our budgeted amount for actuarial costs are for this year. Is this another thing that we aren't budgeting correctly for 2023, 24?
I don't believe it is. The part of the issue here is just the timing, and we had it doubled up, and I bet we're gonna need some more next month, because I saw they don't have much in their purchase order, but they haven't come to me yet. And we get that, a detailed breakdown of what the actuaries think that they're gonna charge us. It's just the flip-flop of the year has been the cost so far.
And you said the rent for Silvermine is going up $1,500 a month?
1,050,
1,000. Okay, so that revenue's gonna come back in eventually.
yes.
Anybody else have questions or?
You actually answered.
The non-union wages for this selectman assistant, is there any savings gonna be on the back end of that with the new position, or is that just a swap for the same salary, the same?
She's
It's not
been,
the same size.
It's not, so
Right.
is this net of that savings that we'll have on the?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, there just isn't a lot of time left in.
There's not, yeah, I realize that, but just curious.
Um,
Basically, you come back and train.
We talked about this slide, unless you have more questions.
No, we're good.
ARPA, you had it in there, the Board of Selectmen tabled it until they find out from the attorney. We just want to make sure we're doing it in the proper manner, because it seemed to make sense. Oh, we could transfer from one line to the other, but what if there's a project that needs more and we don't have it in there? And since it went to a town meeting, both times we've used it, we just want to make sure that, do we have to go back to a town meeting? Does it make a difference if it's money that is left over that we're moving someplace else, or if it's money that's not left over that's never been, used, moving it someplace else. So we want to do that appropriately, so he's working on that.
Do you happen to know how other towns are doing it?
I don't know how other towns are doing it. Even up front, whether they went to town meetings or not, I don't know. I know some didn't back when we were researching that, but when we were researching what they were doing in their presentations, but that was way in the beginning. That's why I haven't looked again.
So if there are no written rules for this, because it's all new to everybody.
It would be the charter, an interpretation of the charter, which is not good. Great. But you can see where we stand, what we know about the ARPA and that schedule that you have. Budget update for next year, revenues, we go through 3 cycles. We go through the governor's budget, and that's what we have, that's all we have when we do our budget. Appropriations committee came out 2 weeks ago, but it is just an interim budget, and then a final budget will come out in June. The Appropriations Committee, usually it's divided out by town, and that work has not been done yet, but in talking with both CCM and cost, education cost sharing should be held harmless, so it should go up to the same amount that we have this year, and ours had dropped 36,000. So as of now, it might come back as 36,000. LoSiP funding may be doubled. However, I guess there's some controversy up there that the Appropriations Committee didn't have the authority to bring that all the way through because the governor has to approve bonding and the state has a lot of debt and he doesn't want to approve bonding. So whether that will actually happen or not, we just don't know. On the expenditures, the House is approved, and it still goes through the Senate and the governor, early voting. We looked at that, and the full-fledged early voting for 14 days, the registrars, with all in, that had thought that would cost us about $50,000. It hadn't passed yet. We took it out of the budget. Right now, based on the House and where it stands now, it won't go into effect until April 2025. And they're talking about maybe some funding to offset for 2 years, and then the rest of the lifetime is us. Capital, we had money in there for Still River Greenway for the design of, and a large grant for that. The design last week was denied, the design money, we just are too rich of a town, is more part of the problem. There will be another round of funding that we could apply for, there's a possibility of cutting in the scope so that it's not as big. There's been no decisions yet, but just so you know where it stands as of now. And we continue to have inflationary and supply chain concerns, especially on the capital projects. Audit update, last year we got a quote from the auditors. We decided not to go out to bid after a long analysis. We got a quote from the auditors that they would go up $1,000 a year. That was pretty good, I thought. And our fees are also pretty good. I didn't do as extensive as a search. I did some work on it this afternoon, and just some of the notable things. The city of Windsor, the town of Windsor, is twice our size. They went out to bid. They got 2 bids. The current auditor increased their fees by $50,000. Hebron, it's half our size. They don't like the auditor because they don't get it on time. They don't get good communication, but they continued with them. We're paying $56 and they're paying $69 for someone they don't like. Woodstock is a third of our size. One of my former clients, they had 1 bidder who is our current auditor, and they increased the fee by $11,000. So I think that $1,000 increase is pretty good. And then at the bottom, the Municipal Finance Advisory Council will meet with you if you're if you're a municipality having either financial trouble or you can't get your audit in a reasonable amount of time. They're meeting with Danbury, for example. They're meeting with Kevinstown, East Lyme. So that's why I was reading their minutes. And they noted 80 municipalities had their audits on extension, and it was the auditors just aren't bidding. There's like 5 firms they can't get help. And so that's what they were concluding was the difference. And when in reading some of this other stuff, that's what they had said in their minutes as well. Tonight, we want to talk about if we want to select the same auditors, if we want to go out to bid, and this was just some background for that. Other items that later in the agenda, you're going to talk about transfers to suspense. I just asked what is her methodology for doing that, and usually it's 1 year at a time. This year she sent a second year to collection. So 19 and 20 have been sent to collections already. 19 was sent a year ago, I believe. What she does is she's moving all of 19's motor vehicle and personal property to suspense. And there's miscellaneous ones in there that are more recent. Those are people that have moved out of state. There was, I think, one real estate one in there. That's one that this lien is still good. The lien is still on it, but they had no takers at a tax sale. So she has a methodology of how she moves these over. They're all still fully collectible. These motor vehicle properties. These people still can't register their motor vehicle. And what they do is they change from the husband to the wife to the kid to the dog. We have, we're required in our accounting manual to have training. Ken and I are both required to do that once a year. We'll have it on Fun Finance Friday. I want to bring up that I called it Finance Friday. Other people added the word fun to it. This year, because we'll have summer hours, it won't be Fun Finance Friday. It'll be Fun Finance Thursday. We're working on updating some purchasing procedures. We're trying to get some feedback from the staff on what they think. They'll come to you after of what they think of potential changes, of other ideas where they're having trouble and what should be changed. We have a draft of new capital asset procedures. It includes inventorying them. Since last year we developed our capital assets, and so we're going to discuss that. We're going to have munis and budget training tips and tricks, Excel training tips and tricks, and food contests and compliance awards. If anyone listening, that last year was the first year the town paid for any of this. The bulk of this I pay for out of my pocket, so don't say, oh, finance is wasting money. That my husband can say that, but you cannot. Any questions on any of that?
Anyone else?
All right, good.
Thank you, Marshall. Thanks.
I'd like to make a motion that we move the new business items for the police outside services fund requests up to now.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll invite you, do you want to come up to the people? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Chris Campbell.
Chris Campbell, thank you.
The chief unfortunately wasn't able to make it today, but if there's any questions,
Okay.
just a phone call away.
Okay.
Thanks.
Before we go, I'm just gonna, he's gonna talk, and another thing, I have to recuse myself from the vote.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I know we received, actually, Tara, do you mind going through this, because this just went through the
Oh.
Board of Selectmen, so
Yeah,
maybe you can.
so the police chief came to me with a request to the Board of Selectmen with a request for 2 items to be purchased through the outside services fund, which was approved by the commission. I think that paperwork is in here.
Please, yeah.
One is for the bike, it went through the capital committee process, and Brianna, if you wanna elaborate on this, 'cause- and Ryan, you guys were part of that whole process, but originally they wanted a new bike. I don't remember the details of that bike, sorry, but that was basically denied. It didn't move forward as part of the budget, so they've now come back and they're looking to purchase a used 2016 motorcycle. Oh, I'm sorry, Brianna, you're not allowed to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, she can be part of the conversation.
I just can't vote.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I just can't vote.
For $20,400, and it's in the memo that was dated the 5th of April. So, Greg, do you want to address the bike itself and then talk about the sonar, or?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Officer Campbell can elaborate on all of that.
Probably worth noting that the cost that's mentioned there, that includes the purchase of the motorcycle, the training, uniforms, equipment, communications.
And how many officers would be trained to use it?
Initially one, after the Board of Selectmen meeting, the chief did indicate that more down the road.
And so then there was the other request was for the sonar? Yeah, I don't know if everybody got a chance to read that when that came through, but when I understand the sonar is irreparable, or unrepairable, so this is a request using outside service funds, for an additional, or a new one. Are there any questions from the board?
Just in terms of money on the capital committee, the new, that they have requested as part of the budget would have been $37,110 plus an additional $4,000 or $5,000 for the equipment. So, they went and figured out a way to get a used motorcycle with their own money, not involved in the budget, saving the town that money, and they did that on their own. So that was a suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brenda, go ahead.
With the helmet, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
you know, when we were going through, you know, we obviously had a typical budget year and we were trying to work with others, and one of the questions actually Brown said, would you be interested in used? And the conversation happened, it seems like they are, and it seems very reasonable. I know there's been a lot of complaints of speeding around town, and, you know, this
it's
might
easier way.
make sense, right?
So I guess my only other question would be for Marcia, do we know what the police outside service fund balance?
It's about $117,000 as of December 31st. It would have been increased since that, but we have to do the accrual adjustments, and we haven't done that since. And that is after 110 for some vehicle that they wanted, which I
Yeah.
don't think they've come to us for yet.
Okay.
Your two questions are exactly what I asked someone.
And, you know, are we, I mean, we all know the federal road work's coming, it seems like there's a healthy balance, we can continue to
It's here.
So I have a question that I didn't ask, if you don't mind, the bike, so if this is approved tonight, I'm assuming you have to be trained before you can even ride it, right?
Training starts tomorrow.
Okay. Oh, wow, look at you guys. But, so for the Memorial Day parade, that's what I'm looking for. Get it
That's,
out there and
that's
show
a
it off.
conversation between you and the chief.
So in that, are there any other, comment, I know that you're abstaining from the vote, but is there any other comments or? Okay, then I guess I'll make a motion that we approve the police outside services fund request for the appropriation of $20,400 for the purchase of a 2016 motorcycle and related safety equipment for the police motorcycle unit as outlined in Chief DeLuce's memo dated April 5th, 2023.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, one abstention. Okay, great, that passes. And I'd like to make a motion that the police outside service fund request for the appropriation of $4,000 for the purchase of a Humminbird Solix 15 sonar unit and accessory order to replace the unrepairable sonar unit and provide needed equipment for the police dive team operators as outlined in Chief DeLuce's memo dated May 3rd, 2023.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Now I can vote.
Yes.
Nothing to do with me.
Yeah, that's gonna be really important, especially going into the late season.
Oh, absolutely, 100%, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, but
I'm trying to figure out why it's making noise.
Do we have a thought?
yeah, that's
Well, that has never happened.
Good luck
before,
with your
has it?
training for
No,
this.
no,
And
but it's run out of air, so.
Okay,
Pressure
Um,
cooker.
then I guess we can go back to the report of committees. Dan's not here.
Yeah.
Might-
not here, so I think
Okay.
table that.
No Audit committee, so we'll discuss
Thanks,
that.
all.
And then the capital committee, any updates?
Not really until once the budget passes, then we'll start meeting again, like Ryan and I were talking about.
That makes sense. Any old business for us to discuss? Maybe. Then back to new business, any further budget discussion?
I threw that on there just in case, I always do,
Okay.
you know, for
Yeah.
the one,
Yeah.
in case something comes up or we wanna, you know.
Yeah, I did have an alibi, just, if you don't mind, just personnel wise, we still haven't hired a library director, and you may have heard that our land use director has left as a full-time employee, so she's filling in some hours just to cover down and close the loop on some outstanding items, but we're gonna start that interview process here shortly, so.
Then we have the annual suspense list approval. So we just had a bit of an overview of it in the
Yep.
slides from Marcia.
We have it in our packet.
Yeah. Might need help knowing what to do with this one. So,
I believe in the past, we just, if we didn't have any questions on it, I think we approved it.
yeah. But what are we approving? Or we just make a motion to approve the annual suspense list?
And I would just put in the amount, because auditors like that, so they know they have the right list.
Which is.
Is that the grand total of 72,000?
Yes,
Does this have to come through the Board of Selectmen first?
it doesn't. I don't know why not, but none of the towns ever go through the selectmen on this.
Because it says to the Board of Finance, Selectmen, action taken by Board of Finance, Selectmen, or other body.
Yeah, it's not every town has a board of finance, but, so that might be why
It's like a blanket to cover whoever makes it, right, I don't know.
But I've
Yes,
never
and
seen that.
Gentlemen, the following list of uncollected taxes is the next one.
Gentlemen.
We need to change our wording, right? Okay, I'd like to amend my motion to approve the annual suspense list of $72,452.70.
I will second.
Okay. Any discussion? None? All in favor? None opposed? Okay. And the next item is the discussion and potential appointment of auditors. So again, going back to Marcia's presentation, does anybody have any comments, concerns, thoughts they want to share on the auditor selection?
I mean, I feel like,
Would you table this to Dan?
Yeah, do we have
Should we-
time to table it, or do we need to?
We
take
do.
this
I
Okay.
did talk to Dan this afternoon, and he said, did
Okay.
we have questions that we wanted answered before? Because he didn't realize we had the 3 years. He was thinking
Okay.
it was just a 1 year. But we can table it. There is a form that's due to the state by May 31st. There's no penalty for not getting it in on time because we're,
We have the mill rate, I mean, this,
I
are
guess.
we okay adding all these things to our mill rate special meeting?
and we can do it in June. It's not a
Oh.
problem. The only consequence is if we wanted an extension in December, if we haven't done it by then they won't give us the extension. But as
Okay.
long as we do it before then, we're good.
Okay.
When does the contract expire?
The contract, we do year by year with them, but we've gotten fees for this year and next year.
Yeah.
And then they weren't willing to commit to $1,000 after that.
So the 3-year contract
Yep.
expires when?
After they've audited
and
June
like,
30th
we
of
don't have to
2024.
wait until June.
Okay. Yeah, let's table that,
For Dan. I
appointment.
feel like we've never done it without Dan, and
Yeah.
he's the chair of the committee, so.
Do we have to make a motion to table or?
I make a motion to table this to the next meeting.
I'll second. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move it to old business
Okay.
for,
Okay. And then
or I'll put it on this.
the last item of new items is the April budget transfers. So we've also discussed those a little bit already.
And you asked the questions I had, so I'm good.
Then I will make a motion that we approve the interdepartment transfers that were presented from the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance of a total of $95,001.98.
That total included the 7,500,
Oh,
so
yeah.
minus the 7,500.
Hold on.
You're making her do the math.
Hmm.
She's doing the math.
$87,501.
I locked myself out of my phone. for a
Okay.
second.
87,001.
What is it?
What?
87, no.
Wait, yeah, I pressed the wrong button.
Just because it's 75.
I can't look.
This is confidence building.
Napkin math.
Oh, 87,501. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve the interfund transfers of $87,501.98.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Okay. Okay. And I think that's, anything else? Any other items to come before the board? Okay. Do we have any public comment?
He's from the police commission.
Oh,
okay. Like, nope.
Sorry.
No.
Okay, no public comment, then I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.